So I'm always curious how you knew you. I'm always curious how composers knew they were a composer. How did you know you wanted to create sounds?
Well, my first musical passions were playing in rock bands, and while that isn't traditionally thought of as a typical background for a composer, it really is a good background, because I was making up music all the time, even though I wasn't writing it down, and I found that all consuming. I mean, I spent hours and hours, and I didn't even know of the profession of being a composer at that point. And I was, an aspiring rock musician, rock star. And it was only in college that I, for the first time, heard classical music, and that, and with that, heard about that job description. I thought you were a rock star, doctor, lawyer, businessman, stockbroker. So when I encountered composer, I said, oh, that's going to feed. That activity will be, a lot like what I'm, consumed by when I wasn't in school. Just growing up, summer vacations were spent with me in my bedroom and my guitar and listening to records. So yeah, I just really flat out decided when I heard classical music, and maybe took a couple of second looks. Maybe thought I'd be a lute player and early music ensemble director for a while, but or performer. But I, pretty quickly came back to composer.
Yeah. When you compose, do you like to improvise? Do you like to sing in the shower? How do you, is it...
Well, all of the above. I do like to sing in the shower, and I do improvise. I mean, improvisation is a big part of my musical life. I teach courses at Princeton. I teach a course called Improvisation for Classical Music Performers. I often do workshops at, Tanglewood or Aspen or various places on improv for, Tanglewood. I did one last year on sort of improv for composers, and I have an improv duo. Me and a drummer, we play out. So there's these two kinds of improvs there's really three kinds. One is for just the fun, personal edification. One is for a ticket-buying audience, and the other is really part of the composition process. I mean, I do feel that improvisation is one of many sort of tools in my toolbox for getting, wrestling the music out of my head onto, out into the world somehow. So I'll improvise on the guitar and record it, or improvise on the piano, and cheap recording often, and just see what comes out.
I think I read an interview where you'd said you'd sort of taped an improv and then went over it with a class and kind of discussed what went on, and I thought that was such a helpful, neat sort of thing to do.
Yeah, well, whenever I'm in the class, or I think the best composition lessons I've ever given, one-on-one really, were improv sessions that we recorded. Play for 45 minutes, record it all, then sit there and listen to it and discuss it, and find that so often the favorite parts, the parts that emerge as the most interesting, are parts that, if you were to write them down, you'd realize violate some taboo about serious composition. And it was my revelation of that 25, 30 years ago that really changed the direction of my music in a lot of ways, and really helped me become me, instead of rewriting the music that I was taught to write.
Yeah. As I saw your guitar concerto in Philadelphia a couple of years ago with the American Composers Orchestra. But I was curious, do you think still performing that helps you as a composer?
Being a performer has had a big influence on all my work. I mean, there was a certain time when I first discovered classical music that I kind of repressed my electric guitar performer background, and at that time composers were really specialists. This is sort of the tail end of a time where it was sort of the composer's job to write music so difficult that only a few self-selected performers could do it. But as I started to not be able to escape the sound of the electric guitar in my ear and envision it for my pieces, turns out that there aren't a lot of electric guitar players that read music in that way, and so I became indispensable, as a performer. And once you start, presenting your music on stage, and you realize that that should be the home of my music, is on a stage rather than on a desk or on my teacher's desk. And this is a pep talk I give to my students often when they're being very fussy over some little complicated notation because it'll look good for a composition contest. It's like you gotta write it in a way that is going to give it the best chance to jump off the stage to the performers. And so probably because of my own performance experience, I consider the performers to be my audience. I really write the music for the performers. It's their job to then communicate it to an audience. But I don't know who the audience is. The performers have a better sense of who their audience is. So really, for me, I think of the group, or the conductor, or whoever it is that I'm writing for, and just try to take the idea that far and let them take it the rest of the way.
Yeah. There's not too many bands I know that have accordion in it, but I know Big Farm has an accordion, and it's not Zydeco or any other sort of odd thing. Is that a fun outlet? Is that something that gives you you guys probably. Well, I'm curious what sort of collaboration happens with Big Farm.
Well, Big Farm is a great outlet, and it's not just a hobby weekend warrior cover band. I mean, it's a serious project. The people in the band are all really great individuals. That's the biggest problem with the band, is that everybody's so busy on their own. So we've got this Jason Truding, who's in So Percussion. He's our drummer. He's also my improv duo partner. Rindy Eckert, who I've worked a lot with in a variety of contexts, is our lead singer, and I play the guitar. We have a Dutch bass player who we encountered, and who's perfect for the job. He improvises, he reads perfectly well, plays new music or jazz, or whatever. So we have all these different kind of all-stars in their own field, and we do collaborate. Rindy basically writes all the words to our songs. But everybody in the band sort of works. One person usually will contribute the main idea to a song for a song, and then the others will evolve it. My songs are start out scored. Start out as if I'm writing chamber music for 4 musicians, and I like it that way because I like the idea of thinking of Big Farm as not a guilty pleasure, but just right in the main confluence of all my work. In fact, 4 of our songs for Big Farm are actually arrangements of a double concerto for electric guitar, violin, and string. So the electric guitar part stays the same. The violin part becomes simplified and becomes a vocal part, which Rindy then writes words to. Somehow the strings get represented in the bass and drums, and those are 4 of our songs. So once I present the group with a score, there probably would be more discussion than if I presented it to a string quartet. I mean, especially with the drums, we'll fuss some things around. But it's really, really fun for me to have that opportunity to play the guitar loud. I mean, I spend so much of my performing life playing with string quartets and orchestras where I really have to be careful not to be the cliche electric guitar player, barging in and very tasteful volume levels, and I've got a whole equipment set up for that. So it is nice to plug into a Fender Twin and get a good homegrown natural tube distortion sound, which I can do when you're playing with a strong drummer and bass player.
Yeah. Have there been rockers that have come up and said, "Oh yeah, hey, I play the electric guitar too"? Are there been any sort of hero moments from?
Well, there's a lot of hero moments. I mean, it's funny. I feel more like a rock star now than when I was actually playing rock music. I mean, and like doing concertos. And, it's a rush to play electric guitar concerto with an orchestra, and Dutch radio symphony in Amsterdam, and there's 2,000 people in the house, and those are very exciting rock moments. And for Big Farm, our audience is actually, well, I guess not surprisingly, but our audience is really that kind of group of people of kind of fringe, artistically adventurous people. Anyway, I mean, I don't think we've ever had like a real headbanger come to a show thinking, "Oh, Big Farm," because it's people that come to our shows know that this is, I guess you'd call it prog, some prog rock, and so they're either fans of one of ours individually, or they've heard of us just through the grapevine. But to me, the biggest rock and roll hero moments are really playing concertos, with great conductors and great orchestras.
Yeah. You live with a composer now.
Yeah.
Is that sort of fun? Is it a challenge sometimes? What?
It's. I think it's great. It's. I mean, regardless of the fact that she's a composer, there's a great personal chemistry there, and so in a certain sense, her being a composer and my being a composer is irrelevant, just personal kind of values and sense of humor. But the fact that we're both composers comes into play every day. We play each other our music as we're working on it. And, is this too cheesy? Is this too this or this? We definitely get each other's opinions. I think we've influenced each other a lot. My work tends to be kind of quirky and off-kilter, and her music is really unabashedly beautiful, and I think I've tried to cultivate some more straight-up beauty in my work, and I think she's tried to cultivate a little more irony and wit in her work, and I'm proud to be influenced by her. We have an age difference. I'm 17 years older than her, so we're sort of at different points of our career, so we're not fighting over the same crumbs of career that we would be if we were the same age. So that, I think, helps it. It sort of makes things easier.
Yeah. I guess I'd end talking about technology and starting out. It's such a different world these days. Social media. I know you tweet here and there, and even technology for recordings has probably changed radically from the early days to now, where we can literally make sort of a CD recording right here on the spot if we wanted to, And I was curious how if that affects your music and if that affects you personally.
Well, I mean, it's funny in a certain way that being an electric guitar player automatically keeps me to some degree from being a Luddite. I mean, the electric guitar is technology, and there's new kinds of effects processors and loopers and things you have to stay up with. As far as technology in terms of real-time performance, other than guitar technology, it's not something that I've really been attracted to. I still am most driven by and most attracted to this, the protein-based life forms, making music. But certainly, your point about recording has really changed things. And coming from rock music years ago, where everything is multi-track, it's sort of surprising now. It's only now that classical recordings are starting to be really multi-tracked and mixed afterwards. So my last couple of recordings really were recorded in such a way that we had a lot of post-production control to get the levels just right, and that feels right to me. That style of post-production and mixing feels like what we should be doing, as opposed to 15 years ago, where you got your sound and that was it.
Yeah, and I would imagine creatively, something like Slide, something like this Prelude to the End that has a wonderful video component, then also as sort of a byproduct has sort of maybe changed a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And It Is Time, this piece I wrote for So Percussion, also has video. just sort of being aware of technology precipitates visions of how it might be used. And like I say, when it comes to the music, I really like to feel that the musicians are playing directly unmediated to the audience. It doesn't mean it can't be amplified, but I'm not a big real-time signal processing, interactive, computer, so that when the clarinet goes boop, what comes out is it's not something that really interests me. It interests a lot of other people, but certainly video and the various ways to sync video with music and to have them work together is really interesting to me.
Yeah. Well, Steve, it's great to talk with you. Thanks.
My pleasure. Nice to talk to you, John.